Isla Morgan had been dreaming of her solo trek through the majestic canyons of the Grand Teton for months. When she finally set out, she disappeared as suddenly and silently as the morning mist. Her father refused to accept her absence as final. Every weekend, he combed the mountains, hoping for a trace, a clue, a miracle. Search teams scoured the backcountry for months, but the vast wilderness offered nothing but silence and shadows. Then, almost a year later, a park ranger studying golden eagles stumbled upon something on a remote cliff ledge, something that would dismantle everything the investigators thought they knew and unveil a nightmare hiding in one of America's most breathtaking national parks. Before we dive into today's story, please note, this video contains sensitive content, including references to violence and disappearance. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. And hey, since we're a brand new channel, your support means everything. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment to share your thoughts. It helps us grow and keeps these important stories alive. The Grand Tetons don't ease you in. They erupt directly from a valley floor Jackson hole, like a jagged wall of granite stabbing into the Wyoming sky. No gentle slopes, no warm-up climbs, just raw, ancient stone, stoic and unmoved by time or human will. For generations, the Tetons have lured explorers, seekers of peace, and those simply hoping to glimpse their untamed beauty. In the summer of 2023, 24-year-old Isla came searching for all three. Friends called her Izzy, and she carried herself with the quiet assurance of someone far more home in the wild than among crowds. A year earlier, she had left behind a promising but unsatisfying career in digital media. She moved to Jackson, renting a modest studio apartment, working part-time at an outdoor gear shop, and spending every free moment venturing into the mountains that had enchanted her since childhood. Her home was a shrine to that love. Topographic maps of the Teton Range covered her walls, marked with pencil trails of hikes completed and those still dreamed of. Her own photographs, black bears in shadowed forests, sunrise over glacial lakes, delicate alpine flowers, decorated the space. A massive moose emerging from the Snake River mist, fiery pink light catching the peaks at dawn, a fragile sky pilot flower blooming defiantly near the tree-line. Those who knew her described Izzy as deeply intentional, almost reverent in the way she prepared for her trips. She wasn't chasing adrenaline or danger. She was an artist and a learner of the land. She understood the seriousness of these mountains, the need for preparation and humility, and she never underestimated what nature could do. A seasoned solo hiker, she often said that solitude was her compass. Alone in the backcountry, with only the wind, her breath, and the click of her camera shutter, she felt most alive. That camera, a weathered Nikon D750, was her treasure. It was how she translated the awe she felt into images that spoke. For weeks, she had been planning what would be her most ambitious solo expedition yet. A 4-day, 3-night journey to the Paintbrush Canyon, Cascade Canyon Loop, a legendary Teton trail, and not an easy one. Over 20 miles of steep elevation, exposed passes, and staggering views. But for Izzy, it was more than a hike. It was a pilgrimage. She wanted to push her limits, to fully surrender to the wilderness, and create a photo series that could anchor her first gallery exhibit. Her roommate, Tessa, would later describe her hunched-over map spread out on the living room floor, tracing the trail by headlamp, a look of quiet joy lighting up her face. She kept saying she just needed the right sunrise, Tessa recalled. She believed that if she could reach Paintbrush Divide at the exact moment the sun hit, she could capture something no one else had. Her final days before departure followed a gentle rhythm of preparation. Her mother, Diane, remembered their last video chat. Izzy's face was glowing with anticipation as she panned her phone to show the gear laid out neatly on the floor. Her well-worn Osprey backpack, a compact tent, her ultralight sleeping bag, a tiny camp stove. Everything was perfectly arranged, just as she liked it. Before setting off, Isla held up her Garmin InReach satellite messenger and promised her mom she'd check in every evening without fail. She was so responsible, so methodical. Diane later said, her voice breaking with grief. Isla had even sorted all her meals into labeled Ziploc bags, one for each day. She had her first aid kit, a water filter, backup batteries for her camera. Nothing was left to chance. That level of detail and preparation would later make her disappearance all the more confounding. Isla wasn't someone who made careless mistakes. On the morning of Friday, August 12, 2023, her silver Subaru pulled into the crowded parking lot at the String Lake trailhead. The air was crisp with the scent of pine and damp soil. The sky above was a flawless blue, perfect weather for a hike. Before hoisting her backpack, she noticed an older couple admiring the mirror reflection of the cathedral group in the still lake. Smiling warmly, she asked if they might take a quick photo of her. The man, a tourist from Ohio named Harold, was happy to help. The picture he snapped would soon become the most widely shared image of Isla, a young woman brimming with life, blonde hair tied in a ponytail, a bright pink tank top standing out against the deep greens of the forest. She stood confidently, one hand gripping her black trekking pole, her loaded pack strapped to her shoulders, with the Teton Peaks rising silently behind her. After thanking them, she wished them a good day and headed toward the water's edge. She looked radiant. The woman, Margaret, would later tell park rangers. She said she felt lucky to live so close to all of this. Isla lingered by the lake for a moment, took a deep breath of mountain air, and texted the photo to her mom. It was the last message anyone would ever receive from her. It read, "Here I go. The weather is perfect. The mountains are calling. I'll check in Sunday night." With that, she adjusted her straps and walked into the trees, disappearing into the shadows of the lodgepole pines, a solitary figure stepping into the vast embrace of the wilderness. Sunday came and went, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, painting the sky in strokes of orange and lavender. Diane sat in her Salt Lake City home, waiting for her phone to buzz with her daughter's promised check-in. By 9 p.m., nothing. She told herself it was probably just a dead battery. Maybe Isla had met some other hikers and stayed an extra night. There were a dozen reasonable explanations. But by Monday night, those comforting stories began to unravel. The silence in the mountains was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. Every call went to voicemail. Every text was marked delivered, but never read. Diane knew her daughter. Isla was precise, conscientious. She wouldn't just go dark like this. Something was wrong. At 7:15 p.m. on Monday evening, hands shaking, Diane contacted the Teton County Sheriff's Office. At first, she explained things calmly, but her voice cracked when she gave them Isla's name and hiking route. Within the hour, the National Park Service was alerted. A ranger was dispatched to the String Lake trailhead to check for her vehicle. Under the rising moon, the Tetons stood silent, towering over the valleys like ancient sentinels. And as the ranger confirmed the presence of the silver Subaru, Isla Morgan was officially declared missing. Her identity, once vibrant and full of plans, was now reduced to a name in a logbook, a search zone on a map, and a haunting question echoing through the granite peaks. The official response began with protocol, not panic. By dawn Tuesday morning, veteran park ranger Tom Calverley stood beside Isla Subaru. The parking lot, once buzzing with hikers, now sat in cold, heavy stillness. A thin layer of yellow dust had settled on the windshield, evidence of time past. Calverley peered inside. A travel mug half filled with cold coffee sat in the cup holder. A folded park map lay neatly on the seat. Everything looked normal, and that was the most unsettling part. He opened the metal trail register and flipped through the log. Isla Morgan, paintbrush cascade loop, 3 nights, return, Sunday. There was no exit signature. Calverley had seen this play out before. Usually, it ended with a tired but healthy hiker returning a day or two late, sheepish and apologetic. But something about this one felt different. As he radioed in his observations, a familiar knot tightened in his chest, instinct whispering that this would not be a routine rescue. By 8 a.m., that whisper became a full-blown operation. The interagency search and rescue team was mobilized, gathering at a makeshift command post near Jenny Lake, ready to comb the unforgiving backcountry in search of the missing hiker who had simply vanished. The air around the command post buzzed with tense, focused energy. Radio chatter murmured under breath. The clinking of climbing gear echoed from packs, and the scent of pine and strong coffee mingled in the early morning chill. Leading the effort was Ranger Dan Holloway, a calm, seasoned figure whose quiet voice carried the authority of someone who had faced nature's worst and come back standing. Before him, a massive topographic map was pinned to a plywood board, the paintbrush cascade loop outlined in bright red. A 20-mile stretch of brutal alpine terrain, unforgiving and immense. "All right, everyone," Dan began, silencing the low hum of activity. "Our subject is Isla Morgan, 24 years old, experienced solo hiker, well-equipped. Her itinerary placed her near Holly Lake on her first night. That's our primary objective." Teams were quickly assigned. Ground units would sweep the loop in both directions. K-9 units were being flown in to work the upper elevations and descend from there. Above the treetops, a search helicopter was already slicing the sky, its rhythmic thumping a familiar sound in moments like these. Equal parts hope and dread. Just past noon, the first lead emerged, and it raised more questions than answers. A search team ascending the switchbacks of Paintbrush Canyon spotted something through the trees. A muted green dome tent nestled in a small grove of firs, just a short distance from Holly Lake. It matched Isla's itinerary perfectly, but the scene was unnerving. The tent was flawless, well-staked, taut lines, nothing disturbed. Inside, a sleeping pad was laid out neatly, and beside it sat a compact day pack. Inside the pack were only a few items: an empty water bottle, a crumpled protein bar wrapper, and a half-used tube of sunscreen. Her main pack, the heavy one with her food, sleeping bag, and survival gear, was gone. So were her hiking boots. To those trained in backcountry logic, this made no sense. If Isla had gone on a short-day hike, she would have taken the day pack and left the heavy one behind. But here, it looked like she'd done the opposite. Left the essentials for a quick hike and walked away with the full load. It defied reason. The decision was made instantly. K-9 units were airlifted straight to the site. One of the dogs, a veteran German shepherd named Echo, was brought to the tent. After a few sniffs, he let out a low whimper and bolted into the woods, his handler racing to follow. But Echo didn't follow the established trail. Instead, he darted up a steep slope covered in loose rock, tangled deadfall, and dense willows, an area no experienced hiker would willingly climb without a clear path. After a grueling half-mile push, they reached a mess of fallen trees and enormous granite boulders. And there, Echo stopped. He sniffed, pace circled. Then he sat down, his tail low, ears back. The scent trail didn't fade. It ended, abruptly, as if Isla had simply vanished into the air. The handler radioed in. Frustration tightened his voice. "The scent just stops. It's gone. There's nowhere else to go." While the K-9 team faced a dead end, another unit tracked down the older couple who had taken Isla's last photo. They were found at a hotel in Jackson, packing for their return flight. When they heard the news, Margaret and Harold were stunned and eager to help. "She seemed so full of life," Margaret said, eyes glossy. "So excited to be out there." Then she paused, brow furrowed. "About 10 minutes after we left her, we passed a man on the trail. He was alone." Harold nodded. "Intense guy. Military-style backpack, real beat-up, didn't speak. Didn't even look at us." Though vague, the detail became the focus. A forensic sketch artist worked with the couple's recollections to produce a composite image. A man in his late 30s or early 40s, with hollow cheeks, deep-set eyes, and a severe expression. They called him the intense hiker. Was he a witness, a coincidence, or something far worse? With no name and no further sightings, he became little more than a ghost, a face on paper, haunting the investigation. Overhead, the search helicopter continued its slow, methodical grid over the valley. From above, the Tetons revealed their terrifying beauty. Deep canyons carved like scars in the earth, thick forests stretching endlessly, and countless places where someone could vanish forever. Spotters searched for a flash of bright fabric, a glint of metal, a lone figure. But the mountains kept their secrets. What had once inspired Isla now seemed to conspire against her. The scale and wildness of the Tetons weren't just breathtaking. They were overwhelming. And for those searching, they were beginning to feel like adversaries. On day 5, everything unraveled. The clear skies darkened. Storm clouds gathered in bruised purple waves and spilled over the ridges. Thunder echoed through the canyons, and the heavens opened with violent fury. Lightning lit up the mountains. Cold, driving rain hammered the slopes. The search was called off. For 36 agonizing hours, no teams could enter the field. Everyone knew what that meant. Whatever clues remained would be washed away. Any footprints? Gone. Any scent trail? Obliterated. The terrain itself had turned slick and dangerous. It was as if the Tetons were erasing her. After 10 days, the only evidence recovered was an abandoned tent and a vanished scent. No boots, no gear, no signs of struggle. Resources were depleted. Emotions were raw. At the final evening briefing, Ranger Holloway delivered the decision no one wanted to hear. The large-scale search was ending. The mission would transition to limited continuous patrol, a bureaucratic phrase that meant hope had thinned to a whisper. The command post was dismantled, volunteers packed up, and an unbearable silence settled over the forest. Isla's parents, who had maintained a quiet vigil in Jackson, broke down. Their daughter had vanished, not just from a trail, but from the world. Her father, Thomas Morgan, a quiet man with a lifetime of land surveying behind him, stood alone in the now-empty operations room, gazing at the large topographic map, still pinned to the wall. The red line tracing his daughter's intended route wound through a sea of rugged wilderness. The official search had ended, but for him, that was only the beginning. The seasons turned across the Teton Range with a kind of brutal, indifferent beauty. Summer's vibrant greens faded into fiery golds and scarlets of autumn, the aspens igniting like matchsticks on the hillsides. Then, just as suddenly, the color was snuffed out by October's first snow. The granite peaks vanished behind veils of heavy gray clouds, and a hush settled over the land, a silence so deep and ancient it felt eternal. As winter took hold, Isla's story began to shift in the public eye. The memory of her bright smile and creative spirit crystallized into something colder, more symbolic than human. Her missing posters, once urgent and vibrant, began to curl at the corners inside the park's visitor center, their colors bleached by the relentless alpine sun. Her case file thickened, stuffed with reports, timelines, and dead ends. Yet somehow, it felt emptier than ever. The investigation was classified as inactive. Her name quietly joined a solemn list of others who had disappeared into the Tetons, individuals and mountains that swallowed without a trace, leaving behind only questions and heartache. For rangers and townsfolk in Jackson, her story became a kind of modern ghost tale, told to seasonal workers and cautious tourists. The photographer who went into Paintbrush Canyon and never came back. But for Thomas, it was not folklore. It was unfinished business. And he refused to let the silence have the final word. A man of structure and precision, Thomas had spent decades turning the wild curves of the earth into neat lines on a map. He could not accept a world where his daughter, so brilliant, so real, could simply vanish without a trace, where the landscape he once understood could hold her and not give her back. While the official search had worked in wide sweeps and general probability, Thomas took a different approach. Painstaking, personal, and obsessive, he sold a small piece of property to fund what became his full-time mission. Instead of retirement, he chose the mountains. Every weekend, he drove the long hours from Salt Lake City to Jackson in his old Ford pickup, loaded down with climbing gear, GPS tools, and enough supplies to last him days in the backcountry. Rangers came to know him well. They'd spot his truck at trailheads long before dawn and still park long after dark. They greeted him with quiet sympathy, offering coffee, updates, or simply a nod of understanding. They knew he was chasing a ghost, but in his determination, they also saw a father who had refused to surrender. He didn't stumble through the wilderness blindly. He mapped it, painstakingly overlaying satellite data with geological charts, dividing the vast region into small, manageable quadrants. He then searched each square with discipline, often spending an entire day combing a single steep ravine or dense thicket the helicopters had barely skimmed. He searched for anything out of place, a piece of cloth, a scuffed rock, a faded depression in the soil. He found nothing, and yet with every square crossed off his hand-drawn maps, His resolve only deepened. The search was no longer about hope. It was about truth, about bringing Isla home. While Thomas hunted in the physical world, the digital world carried on its own investigation. On true crime subreddits and hiking forums, Isla's case remained a topic of obsessive discussion. Web sleuths from across the globe combed through every scrap of information, piecing together theories, timelines, and maps. The most accepted theory mirrored the official stance: a tragic accident. Maybe she had slipped from a cliff or fallen into a hidden crevice. In such terrain, even an experienced hiker could vanish in an instant. Others proposed an animal attack. Perhaps a bear or mountain lion had ambushed her. But the campsite had been untouched. No blood, no torn gear, no tracks. The theory didn't hold. Some even speculated that Isla had chosen to disappear, citing snippets from her journals, entries that spoke of longing for solitude and disconnecting from her past. Some believed she had staged her own vanishing, that she had walked into the mountains not to hike, but to escape. But the theory that gripped people the most was darker. Foul play. All eyes turned to the mysterious, intense hiker, the gaunt man with the old military pack. The sketch of his face, shared online, took on a life of its own. They gave him names: the Phantom of Paintbrush, John Doe of Cascade Creek, the man with no eyes. With no name and no further sightings, he became a myth, a canvas for every worst-case scenario. Had he stalked her from the trailhead? Was he hiding in the forest? The total lack of closure only magnified the fear. He became a ghostly villain in the collective imagination of the internet. Months passed. Thomas kept hiking. The online forums spiraled in endless loops. And then, in late August 2024, almost exactly a year after Isla vanished, something surfaced. A fly fisherman exploring a secluded bend of Cascade Creek spotted something glinting between two rocks underwater. He waded in and pulled it free, a single black hiking pole. The grip was worn, the tip scratched. A high-end brand popular among serious hikers. He recognized it from the missing posters and reported it immediately. The news reignited the case. Investigators confirmed it matched the model Isla had been holding in her last photograph. Her parents were informed. Their hope returned like a sudden storm, sharp, electric, and fleeting. A special search team was dispatched to the site. But soon, the hope collapsed under the weight of reason. Hydrologists explained that in a watershed as vast and volatile as the Tetons, the pole could have washed down from anywhere miles away. Spring runoff, landslides, melting snow. It could have been dislodged from any high slope and deposited randomly in the stream. It was real. It was hers. But it meant nothing. Like the scent trail that had vanished mid-slope, it offered no answers. Just another fragment. Another dead end. The mountains had given up one small trace, only to close in tighter around the rest. As summer returned once more to the high country, wildflowers bloomed in brilliant explosions of purple, gold, and white across the alpine meadows, while marmots sunned themselves lazily on granite ledges and golden eagles soared on thermal updrafts overhead, scanning the wild terrain below. One man among the winged hunters was about to stumble upon the break that would shatter a year's silence. Ranger David Liu, a soft-spoken 15-year veteran of the National Park Service, was known for his encyclopedic knowledge of wildlife and his deep reverence for the land. But above all, he was a devoted ornithologist. Though he fulfilled his ranger duties with precision, Liu's true passion was studying raptors, particularly golden eagles, in the vast Yellowstone ecosystem. In late July, nearly a year after Isla Morgan had vanished, Liu was conducting his annual survey of nesting sites. This task took him well beyond tourist trails and known overlooks, into steep, isolated valleys few humans ever dared to explore. That day, Liu hiked into a high alpine basin of shattered scree and sheer rock faces, a place of brutal majesty. With the ease of a seasoned climber, he moved along narrow ledges, binoculars slung at his chest like a second pair of eyes. Scanning a distant cliff wall, he quickly spotted a large nest, an eagle's eyrie, perched precariously on a grassy ledge. From the ridge, he zoomed in. The nest was a sprawling construction of sticks and bone, nearly 5 feet across. Classic golden eagle architecture. But something strange stood out. Amid the browns and grays of natural material were vivid flashes of color, an unnatural turquoise, and a strip of faded crimson. His first assumption was litter, plastic or fabric discarded by careless hikers. It was sadly common, even in the most remote regions. Concerned that such debris could endanger the eagles or their fledglings, Lou decided to investigate further. The climb was steep, loose, and dangerous, a technical scramble over crumbling rock and slick grass. He radioed in his location, secured his gear, and began the ascent. With each step, his unease grew. The colors grew clearer, sharper. The turquoise was not plastic, and the red, he realized with dread, wasn't rope. He reached the ledge, heart pounding from exertion, and something else, a rising sense of something wrong. The eagle's nest was as massive and intricate as it had appeared from afar. But woven deep within it were the scraps he'd seen, a torn strip of turquoise nylon, the kind used in rain covers or stuffed sacks, and a grimy, weather-stained pair of women's underwear, mostly white, but with red trim along the waistband and legs, now faded and brittle. Lou froze. His mind flashed with memory. The missing posters, the briefings, the photo of Isla at the trailhead, her backpack, turquoise blue with red accents. The red trim on the underwear was nearly identical. It wasn't trash. It was a message, a piece of someone's life, carried by wings into the sky, with trembling hands. He pulled out his service phone and began snapping photographs from every angle. He didn't touch the items. He knew instantly what this was. Not litter, evidence. "Base, this is Lou," he said into his radio. His usual calm cracked with tension. "I'm at the nest site, Upper Basin. I may have found something possibly related to the Morgan case." The response at the ranger station was immediate. Shock rippled through the building like a seismic wave. A year-old case, cold and buried beneath silence, was suddenly red hot. When Lou returned, the bagged items were laid carefully on a clean surface. Investigators pulled up Isla's last known photograph. They placed a red-trimmed underwear beside a high-resolution image of her backpack. The color was a near-perfect match. Silence fell across the room. No one had to say it aloud. The implications were clear and horrifying. Golden eagles are not just hunters. They are scavengers, drawn to carrion, to the scent of death. The most likely explanation was chilling. An eagle had discovered Isla's body, or at least her clothing, somewhere nearby, drawn by blood. The bird had torn at fabric and carried a piece back to reinforce its nest. Suddenly, the mystery wasn't global anymore. It was local. Isla hadn't vanished into hundreds of miles of wilderness. Her body, or what remained of it, was likely within sight of that cliff, somewhere on or beneath the brutal slopes surrounding the eagle's perch. The search shifted from impossible to surgical. The National Park Service greenlit a focused recovery mission. This was no longer a missing persons case. It was a search for remains. A specialized team was assembled, experts brought in when only the worst was expected. Forensic anthropologists from the University of Wyoming, Teton County's best cadaver dog handlers, veteran members of the High-Angle Search and Rescue Unit. They were airlifted to a narrow plateau beneath the eagle's nest. The thundering rotors of the helicopter stirred the wildflowers and flattened the grass, as if announcing that the mountain silence was finally being challenged. There was no optimism this time. No families waiting for joyful reunions. Only solemn determination. The new grid was small, just 1 square mile, but the terrain was nightmarishly steep. Screes slipped like marbles beneath their boots. Jagged boulders rose like broken teeth. Stunted trees clawed at the wind. The team moved slowly in precise patterns. Cadaver dogs swept the slopes with heightened alertness. Their handlers whispered commands. For 2 days, the search yielded nothing but heat and silence. On the 3rd morning, that changed. A black Labrador named Odin paused near a cluster of twisted firs at the base of a rocky outcrop. He sniffed, whined, and pawed at the earth. His handler froze. This was the final signal. He had found something. The team converged. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Alana Rios knelt carefully beside the spot and began brushing away the topsoil. To an untrained observer, it looked like nothing, just a patch of disturbed soil and a few oddly arranged rocks. But to Dr. Alana Rios, every detail screamed unnatural. The depression in the earth, the clustered stones stacked in defiance of erosion. It was a grave, shallow and hidden. "Start here," she said softly, pointing to the center. With small trowels and brushes, the team began peeling away the top layer, inch by inch. It was meticulous work. Over an hour passed before one of the searchers paused. His tool had scraped against something both hard and pliable. He brushed gently. A strip of faded blue fabric appeared, the sleeve of a technical hiking shirt. A few inches away, a curve of bone emerged from soil. Human. The team redoubled their efforts, now certain of what they were uncovering. Piece by piece, the shallow grave gave up its secret. 2 feet beneath the surface lay a partially intact human skeleton. The remains were documented, photographed, and gently transported by air to the county coroner's office. Identification came swiftly. Within 24 hours, dental records confirmed the truth. The body belonged to Islam Morgan. When the news reached her parents, it was a tidal wave of emotion, devastation, grief, and the quiet, aching relief that she had finally been found. But the sense of closure evaporated with the autopsy. Dr. Rios' analysis revealed a horror that no one had prepared for. Multiple bone fractures, including a devastating blunt force trauma to the skull. Blows far too forceful to result from a fall. And worse, forensic evidence confirmed it beyond doubt. Isla had been sexually assaulted before she was killed. The case was immediately reclassified. This wasn't a tragic misadventure. It was murder. Everything shifted. Investigators combed back through old notes, rereading the early reports with new eyes, now attuned not to missteps or accidents, but to intention, to violence. The only potential lead they had ever possessed, the vague sighting of the intense hiker with a military pack, was no longer just a detail. It was their best hope. The original sketch, once a speculative image, was now reissued across media networks, not as a witness, but as a suspect in a brutal homicide. The response was immediate. The online communities that had once debated Isla's fate exploded in activity. The story was no longer a haunting disappearance. It had become a nightmare realized. And the breakthrough came not from DNA nor from a lab, but from a woman named Brenda working the night desk at a roadside motel in Pinedale, Wyoming. She was watching the news on a small TV in the lobby when the composite sketch flashed across the screen. Her blood ran cold. She had seen that face, the deep-set eyes, the gaunt expression, the rigid jawline. A man had stayed at her motel the previous summer, just before the hiker went missing, paid in cash, never spoke unless necessary, said he was working seasonal construction, and then he vanished, checked out without a word the same week Isla's disappearance hit the news. His name in the motel log was Robert Frazier. The moment the name hit the tip line, everything accelerated. A joint task force was formed. Frazier, 42, was a transit with no online footprint and a sealed juvenile record that included a violent assault. He drifted from state to state, doing under-the-table jobs on farms and construction crews. The team tracked his path north, from Wyoming to Montana. He was located working as a ranch hand outside Billings. At dawn, a team of federal agents and local deputies descended on the isolated property. Frazier was arrested without incident, showing no emotion, a hollow shell of a man. In a dusty shed on the edge of the ranch, hidden beneath tarps and old tools, investigators found a locked metal footlocker. Inside was a predator's archive, 3 driver's licenses belonging to missing women, trinkets, locks of hair, jewelry, and wrapped in an old, stained T-shirt, a Nikon D750. The serial number matched Islam Morgan's camera. At the FBI's forensic lab, the memory card was recovered. The first images were as expected. Isla's final height captured in soft, golden light. Wildflowers, ridgelines, morning fog on alpine lakes. Then the shift. A sequence of photos taken by Frazier. First, distant shots of Isla walking, unaware. Then closer, closer still, until final frames, graphic, chilling, and undeniable. Photos of the attack, of her final moments, of her lifeless body. Cold documentation by a man devoid of empathy. In the interrogation room, Frazier said nothing. He sat in silence, staring ahead. Two officers, a seasoned FBI agent and a Teton County detective, took turns questioning him, but his face remained blank, not even a flicker. Then came the photos. One by one, the agent laid them on the metal table in front of him. Landscapes, then surveillance, then murder. Not a word was spoken, but the narrative was clear. Frazier's eyes followed the images, frame by frame. From innocence to horror, he didn't speak. He didn't blink. For 7 minutes, there was only silence. His eyes locked on the final image. The only sound was the low hum of the room's ventilation. Finally, he broke. His voice was low, flat, almost casual. That made it more chilling than any scream. "That's me," he said, nodding slightly toward one of the photos. It wasn't a confession. It was a fact. Cold, matter of fact. And with that, the dam broke. Robert Frazier began to speak. Not with remorse, not with shame, but with the clinical detachment of a man recounting a routine. He admitted seeing Isla at the trailhead and being immediately drawn to her. He spoke of following her from a distance, describing her movements, her camp, her solitude, with predatory precision, as if he'd done it 100 times before. He said he waited until she left her tent to collect water. Then he struck. When asked why he killed her, his answer was void of empathy. "She fought harder than I expected," he said flatly. "I had to end it." He buried her in a shallow grave and took her camera, not for money, not for utility, but as a trophy. When asked about motive, about why he chose her, his response sent chills down the spine of every investigator in the room. She shouldn't have been out there alone. His confession unraveled a much deeper horror. It connected him to at least 2 other unsolved disappearances, young women who had vanished in the wilds of the Rocky Mountains. He wasn't a ghost anymore. The shadows had a name, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. The trial was swift. The evidence, especially the memory card from Isla's camera, was overwhelming. The courtroom in Jackson overflowed with press, citizens, and families whose lives he had shattered. Isla's parents, Thomas and Diane, sat silently in the front row every day, holding hands like 2 people clinging to what little remained of their world. They listened as prosecutors recounted in chilling detail the final moments of their daughter's life. They heard the pathologist's report. They saw the images. They endured the unbearable. Frazier, meanwhile, sat motionless throughout, his face an emotional void, a black hole into which all humanity had collapsed. It took the jury less than 3 hours. He was found guilty of kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. The judge's voice trembled with restrained rage as he delivered the sentence. Life in prison with no chance of parole. The man who had once roamed the wild like a phantom would now die in a concrete cell, surrounded not by mountains, but by walls. The ripple effects of his arrest traveled far beyond the Tetons. The driver's licenses found in his locker reopened cases long thought lost. One belonged to a 28-year-old woman who vanished while hiking alone in Colorado San Juans. Another belonged to a 22-year-old student who disappeared in Idaho's Sawtooth Wilderness. Their families, like the Morgans, had lived in suspended grief. Now, at last, they had answers. Frazier's confession revealed where he had buried them. Closure came, but it came soaked in horror. He was a predator who had used the beauty and isolation of the wilderness as his hunting ground. A ghost no longer, just a monster in plain view. For Thomas and Diane, the conviction brought justice, but not peace. How could it? Nothing could undo what had been done. And yet, they had their daughter back. They laid Isla to rest, not in a church, but at a scenic overlook deep in the park, the cathedral peaks towering silently behind them. Family and friends gathered in the wind, under the sun she had once photographed so joyfully. One by one, they shared memories, her wild laughter, her stubborn optimism, her deep love for the wild. Then Thomas stepped forward. His voice, quiet but steady, carried through the hush. "I'm not a hero," he said, dismissing the praise so many had given him. "I just did what any father would do. I just want to find my little girl." And now he had. Isla Morgan was finally home. Her story, though, left a scar on the town of Jackson, on the backcountry community, on anyone who had ever sought peace in the wilderness. It became a solemn reminder. The danger in the wild isn't always a cliff or a storm. Sometimes it wears a human face. Sometimes it walks the same trails, hides behind a smile, and waits for the right moment to strike. The Tetons remain as they always have, unchanged in their grandeur. The peaks still catch fire at dawn. The rivers still run cold and pure. The forests still whisper their ancient songs. But for those who know Islah's story, that beauty is forever edged in shadow, and the silence of the wilderness will never sound quite the same again.